Welcome to another episode of AI After Hours. Each month, we cut through the AI hype by answering your top questions and calling bullshit on the headlines that we don't think make any sense. Join us for a monthly roundup of the AI news and real insights into what's true and what's not in the world of artificial intelligence. Have a question or topic you want us to address? Email us and join the conversation. Email us at support@AI Career Boost, and we'd love to hear your ideas. Let's dive into the world of AI together.
I'm your co-host, Yuying Chen-Wynn, a technology and product executive with extensive experience in AI, fintech, and edtech. I'm an ex-chief product officer turned AI executive, currently leading everything generative AI in the financial company Peak Six and its family of companies. I specialize in building high-performing teams that actually understand what it means to meaningfully leverage AI into your business. And I really love talking about AI, especially with my co-host.
I am that co-host. My name is Polly Allen, and I'm the founder of AI Career Boost, where I spend my time helping product managers and business leaders navigate the world of AI and transition into AI leadership roles. I've spent my career in both the product and the software development side of the software world, and I'm the ex-Alexa AI principal product manager that successfully launched the very first generative AI answers on Alexa back in 2020. I was fortunate enough to be recognized as one of the top 100 women of the future, and I'm also really love talking about AI with Yuying, especially on After Hours, where we always have some kind of bevy ready. What do you have this week, Yuying?
Yeah, well, this week, no sponsor. I'm drinking my Snapple favorite, which is the peach tea.
Nice. Oh, I love the peach. I'm the same. I'm addicted to their peach tea. Yeah, totally. My aspartame addiction means I'm usually addicted to the like diet version, but um, I have this awesome kick-ass mug that I got for my birthday a couple weeks ago that
Oh,
I love.
okay, you gotta tell me what it says because I cannot see it.
It says, "You make the world a better place." It
Ah,
has
with
a
a
rainbow handle, and I just finished like a 3 week sober October situation, so I allowed myself. I've got a nice warm fall coffee with Bailey's.
oh, very nice, very
Tis
nice.
the
I
season.
will.
Tis the season.
This is pumpkin spice. No pumpkin spice.
Awesome. Well, let's dive into it. What have you got for the headlines for us this month,
All
Ying?
right, we're gonna start with the monthly news roundup. Now, as usual, there's much more headlines that we'll cover. We kind of pick through everything that we've seen out there and highlight what we think is relevant, different, and focus on us in on different topics. So one of the things this month, of course, lots of model updates, but we're not going to go into that because there's way too many of them. So let us start with the very beginning of the month, the much anticipated OpenAI Dev Day. So this, just a quick recap, it's a one-day conference where all the developers come together for OpenAI. And usually, like last year was the first one, they announced new models, they announced new features, they announced new APIs, capabilities that developers get to. It is a very hot ticket in town. Very few people can get to it. I didn't get in. I'm just saying, OpenAI, I think you made a mistake on that one. But
Your taste level needs some
really,
elevation.
yeah. Although this year they actually opened two other locations. There was a Dev Day in London and a Dev Day in Singapore. I think I made the mistake of applying for San Fran. I think I should go to Singapore next year. I'm just leaving that out there. But okay, so one release, it was at the beginning of October. Let's talk about what they announced. So a lot of announcements, but my personal favorite was the real-time voice API. They just called it real-time API, which is a little bit misleading and confusing, which allows you to build applications where you can have a bot interact with you in a conversation mode that you can interrupt and ask questions much more human-like. That was my favorite. So, Polly, I know you've looked at what else is what released. What's your take on OpenAI Dev Day this time?
Yeah, there was definitely some interesting pieces that are going to help us build new things, and then some stuff that's going to be really help on costs, right? And that's they were like kind of these are there was nothing like unexpected, but they are very useful, right? So the real time voice, lots of people have been playing around with the real time like voice assistant. So to be able to have access to that via API, a lot of people are excited about what like more real interaction they can build by voice that they couldn't before. The other piece I thought was kind of cool was vision fine tuning. I've definitely had some projects and stuff that we've been working with, either with companies or with people, where they're like, "Oh, I want to improve the model's ability to recognize objects in these images out of the box. It gets about 80%, but how do we make it? How do we improve it?" You were able to do it with like in a say a chat GPT window. It could be like, nope, that's not this kind of pill. It's that kind of pill. If you were doing like drug recognition, right, looking at pills, so like you could prompt it kind of, but like there was no clear instructions on to how, and we were kind of experimenting with that. Now we actually have like a way through programming that you can fine tune the vision API and actually improve its accuracy, which is like it's just a boon for anyone working in the vision space, I think. Did you have any takes on the vision fine tuning? I remember you kind of were wondering like what are the applications here?
Yeah, not so much. I mean, but also I'm currently in the financial industry, so we really that piece of it doesn't come as much. I'm very curious for the healthcare pieces because you talked about medicine, which is much more general. I know there's like radiology. There's a lot of things you can do here. I mean, I wish I was working with healthcare so I can play around with this. But the thing for me about this OpenAI Dev Day, unlike last year, it actually felt like it was targeted for devs. Like it felt like the API and the features, number one, they were available, unlike all of this. It's coming soon, but nobody can touch it. And last year, a lot of the features were much more, I feel like, consumer facing versus developer facing. Fine tuning, definitely for us, not for the normal users. The API is definitely for us, right? So, overall, I think step in the better direction from a developer ecosystem point of view. I'd love to see what people come up with vision fine tuning. I don't get as much time to play with it, even though I'm originally from computer vision.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's why I thought it would be cool to get your take on like, hey, I used to work in this space, but I think it'll be useful out of the box for the people who are doing those vision like tasks. And then there were also announcements that are going to help people do things more efficiently and cheaper, right? So caching responses is huge in terms of like that's just like a yeah, we got to do that. A lot of the time you have repeated responses, right? Places like Alexa, we saw sort of 80% of the queries being these head queries where everyone's saying, Alexa, play music, Alexa, turn on the lights, right? And then you've got this range of all the crazy things people say that's in that 20%. But to handle that 80% with cached answers instead of having to generate new ones every time, massive savings in terms of how much it costs to run these systems. It's just a no brainer, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that is another great one for developers. So, moving on from the OpenAI Dev Day, as you, it's very hard to go any month without talking about OpenAI, and this time we're going to have a second one, not just on the Dev Day itself. A lot of stuff happening. Okay, OpenAI fundraising. They just closed the largest VC raise in history, like ever in a single.
It's I mean, there's always someone setting a new record, right? But I don't know. I haven't actually. We'd have to do some research. How much bigger is this than like the largest ever before it? Right? This is nuts.
Yeah, yeah. The thing, so I'm unfortunately I didn't write down the numbers. I believe it was a valuation of about 6 billion. Um, uh, how much was the fund actually raised? I want to say 150 million, but this seems really small.
I'm actually just
Really,
looking it up.
exactly. But so the
It's
raise
valued at
itself,
157 billion.
yeah, it's valued at 157 billion. They raised six. Is
Yeah,
that correct? All right.
exactly.
Those numbers
6.6. Yeah, like
was. I was just like, what? Really?
who are we
Okay.
going to get
So
to those like 10 billion? Like what's more unique than a unicorn?
yeah. So here's the thing about this round. Not only is the largest, for those of us that are actually in the investment side, unless you were a cool person, which means we were not, you can't even get to look at, be considered one of the potential investors. This is also one of the fastest raises at this size with this kind of evaluation and this kind of numbers. They closed super quick. I heard about it for like 2 weeks and then it was done, right? Um, Related to this, right? Part of the terms of this raise is that they move to a for-profit structure. So OpenAI, if you do not know, is currently an interesting for good organization, which meant they're not technically a full nonprofit like your normal nonprofits, nonprofit governing a for-profit, but originally investor returns were capped at 100x because of this structure. Any additional money was supposed to go back to the greater good.
Exactly. So it's like they were not. They were not open source, and they were not for profit, which a lot of people still, get confused and think they are. They had started out as a not for profit and very much, supporting open source communities and stuff. And then that was a big bust up with Elon Musk leaving, when there was going in a more commercial direction where it became like like a commercial entity, or their nonprofit was like governing their commercial entity. Now it seems like they're taking a further step, right, in that commercial direction.
Yeah. So if they don't actually, I believe the term is if they don't make that structural change, they have to return back the investor money of the round, which I do think is related. I could get your take on it. We also saw at the same time a whole bunch of high level OpenAI founders leaving, including the CTO. But it's not the only one. It's like a handful at that level leaving at the same time. So
Exactly.
so
Yeah,
largest
a
roles,
lot of the top kind
80%
of,
top people leaving. What did you get from all of this?
well, and I think it definitely seems like in order to raise, to go from a company, they went from like, we're not going to be like, as a nonprofit, they didn't have the structure to raise money because they're like, we're not making profit. What VC is going to invest in us, right? When the VCs are looking for returns on the investment, right? And so that was the reason for them turning into that other structure where so that Microsoft could invest in them. It's obvious that Sam Altman is like, I'm going to drive this thing to the moon, right? Let's see how much, like we need this money to drive the growth, to drive the GPUs that we need to buy, right? And it's clearly on a mission towards what they think will lead to AGI, right? But he sees it very much as a commercial venture to get there as opposed to a more humanitarian venture. And it feels like there's just a schism that was like, for some folks, they could take it as far as getting Microsoft to buy in because they did have to have some investment in order to get the GPUs to do what they wanted. But at this point, maybe this was a step too far for a lot of the
Founders
founders
that
and
came in
top
on a
people,
different
right?
idealism.
Yeah, exactly. And they've split off and are starting to found their own companies, right? It was announced today that Miriam Murati, the former CTO, is starting her own startup as well. So pretty much all of them have their
I'm
own
sure
startups,
her
which are
raise is
going to
going
be
to be
quickly
announced.
funded as well, like you can imagine.
Very, very. Yeah. So almost every month, no avoiding OpenAI. So we got their Dev Day. We got the largest raise in history. I'm gonna guess there might be another one before they go IPO. For-profit structure change and founders leaving. Okay, moving on to the next one. Let's switch. Let's leave OpenAI for just a little bit. Notebook LM. So
Yeah, everyone's talking about Notebook LM, right?
very quickly, this is a project out of Google, I believe still with Google DeepMind. Um, at I think the banner level, it's an application focused on helping you the studies, right? So it's aimed at students, helping you take notes, summaries, etc. And it has a very interesting feature that everybody is kind of buzzed about, but I'm going to leave that to Polly to tell us. What do you think about Notebook LM? What's this cool thing that everyone's a buzz about?
Yeah. So the big sexy feature is the that it generates a podcast for you. So you upload any document, and it's meant to be, they call it a research assistant. So it's not just, hey, upload a document and chat with your document. There is a chat interface as part of it, but you upload the document and it gives you kind of a dashboard of like, here's a summary, and hey, here's a bunch of buttons where you can actually say like, build me a study guide, or build me an outline. Like, what are the kinds of things you want to do with this document? That you're attempting to learn from? But the thing that everyone's going nuts about is the podcast feature, and it really is because not only does it generate like a podcast in terms of it generates an audio file, it's actually two hosts' voices that do sound a lot like radio hosts talking back and forth. It's really engaging. Like, it's quite impressive. They can talk over each other. Every once in a while you can hear them get a word wrong or something, which I find entertaining. But it's jarring because it really does sound like the talk podcasts we're used to hearing, right? And what was really cool is I just saw today, some of the makers announced this, that it's some of the Google employees started this as a 10% project where they have some extra time to work on something fun, and they'd started on this. Uh, the number one requested feature was the ability to kind of tweak the podcast. So you're now able to enter a prompt to actually, like, you know, curate how the podcast should work, only focus on this section of like a really long document, right? Um, I found it really interesting. So I had generated out of pure curiosity a notebook LM for the Project 2025 document, just to see. And it's fascinating because they're talking about this in terms of like, oh, and they want to do this. Wow, that's pretty radical stuff. And I'd love to like get that idea of like, ooh, there's definitely certain factions that wouldn't like them talking that way about it. There's also other factions who might find what the way they're talking about it kind of apologist for more extreme views, right? So it was really fascinating to see what you get out of the just out of the box for that feature for something as divisive as something like Project 2025. Encourage you to try that at home. It's a free tool. Google LM,
So what
a free
surprised
tool.
me is Notebook LM I saw many, many, many months ago, and you can clearly tell it was somebody's side project. I was not impressed. I was like, oh, this is just a rag with some templates, right? And then within the last month, I had multiple people ping me, hey, have you seen this Notebook LM? Have you? And I'm like, what? This is like an old cricket. I understand why did all of a sudden it came up, on the hot buzz button, and it's this podcast feature, which actually was a research paper that it was somebody's research project, and somebody just decided to hook it in because they thought it was funny. Uh, that's my guess. They probably thought it was a little bit more than funny, but that's how I judge everything that's useful. If it's funny, then I'll put it in. But this has been very interesting that one small feature on what I feel like is every other RAG app there is, put the buzz in.
Totally. Exactly. And especially, yeah, the first time I'd seen it, it was sort of when the first buzziness about the podcast feature came out. I remember like the technologist side of me is like, there's nothing new here. We've been able to do voice generation. It's kind of cool, and then you really have to step back and go, okay, look, this is the first time some people are seeing this really hyper realistic voice piece, right? And even though it's like, yeah, we have all these building blocks, they put it together in this way that grabs the public imagination. Yeah, I'm so used to looking at things and kind of going, oh, yet another, reg. It's doing a summary and an overview, and then you can do chat with your documents. Like there's 1,000 of these. That's boring. That I definitely kind of dismissed it. And even when I first heard the podcast, I was like, oh, who's really going to listen to these? And it took sitting down and listening to one to go, huh, you know what? That's like way more useful than I would have given it credence for. Like when you say AI generated podcast, you're like, how good can that be? Right. And I was like, you know what? That's like pretty engaging. I would, if there was a complicated document that I needed to like understand, could I upload this document, download the file, and listen to it on a walk? Like that's a good use of my time. It's actually that useful, right? Um, so it's just putting these blocks together in new ways that I think it's we're just scratching the surface of how many different cool ways we can combine this. And I think that's what's pretty cool too, is people are finally recognizing in the investment world too that like putting together things in new ways has a lot of value. And these they used to be saying 6 months ago, oh, if it's just a wrapper around ChatGPT, blah blah blah, who cares? There's no competitive moat. But actually, like, there's so many interesting ways to put this together that are just going to grab attention, that's going to drive value, that now people are like much more interested in those kinds of projects and investing in those kinds of businesses.
Yeah. I mean, you still hear kind of like, unless they're building their own model, it's not worth anything, right? And then you have this where it's literally the user experience. The tech is all the same pieces, but a unique user experience is the one that's making a differentiation. I don't know if anybody will invest in it. That's different. But
At the VC level, right? So you're not going to have like a unicorn company. And I think it's much more like go after a particular niche and you can build a sizable business on that, right? On having really great prompts, right? And really something that's putting together stuff in a new way. The other thing about Notebook LM is I think it's the first time people fell in love with ChatGPT. When they think of LLMs, that's what they think of as the interface, like in the average public. This was the first time they're actually combining something that's not a chatbot with a chatbot. And that's been a trend in industry over the past year. People threw up chatbots and they're like, hey, weird. Nobody just wants chatbots for chatbots' sake because ChatGPT is popular. It actually has to be like the right use case for a chatbot. Um, a lot of interfaces were experimenting with like, well, okay, throwing up a summary, giving them more than a couple of suggestions of what to ask, but a lot more context about what you can do. What is a useful starting place in a more kind of traditional point and click UX? with the chat as an addition. So I think that might be part, like they came for the podcast, but they're staying because they're like, oh, I hadn't thought about interacting with these models this way, and it kind of opens their minds to what these models can do. I hope anyway.
Okay, so notebook LM resurfacing because of a unique user experience. There is still hope for anybody not building a foundational model to have a really great business around generative AI. Okay, last but not least, the Nobel Prize was announced. Okay, so what's interesting is Nobel Prize, of course, does not have a category for computer science. So, but there were two awards, two categories that were given to AI, one in physics and one in chemistry. Now, Polly knows a lot more about this, so I'm going to hand it over on the on the physics side. Actually, Hopefield and Hinton got the Nobel Prize for essentially the foundation pieces of the neural network. Yeah, I'm gonna ask Polly to like confirm or deny.
No, specifically, my understanding was it's back propagation. So that idea of like a big piece of neural network and machine learning, architecture is around being able to show it examples. So it kind of you look at a bunch of data, it derives. Think of it as neural network that it builds to explain that data as like a hypothesis, right? And then the idea of saying, no, I'm going to show you examples again at the other side of like here's the answers I want you to derive from this input, and it goes back through that neural network, kind of adjusting the weights to kind of say, okay, how do I make sure that I will tune this to get more answers like these? That back propagation process was pioneered by Geoffrey Hinton. So it is foundational to neural networks on which LLMs are built. It's not just general machine learning field that owes a lot to him, but it really is a foundational piece of everything on which LLM, etc., could not have been built, right? Um, it's interesting that it's happening now, and then they're referring back to this thing that was foundational to specifically like old school AI, and not just the LLM piece, right? They're not granting this to like the people who wrote the Transformer paper, for
Yeah.
example, right, out of
I mean,
Google.
Nobel Prize, I think in general, when they're awarded, is for work that is almost 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's very commonly the case. One thing though is you do have to be alive to receive the Nobel Prize. You can, they do not give the Nobel Prize to those who are deceased. Yes, I know my dad tracks this quite closely. Um, but the question I have is, very, should this have been in physics? That one really threw me off.
Yeah, exactly. I know because I remember noticing that too and being like, "What?" And then I was like, "Well, is there must be applications in physics that this, apply, made the biggest difference in." But it was like it makes the biggest difference in biology and health and all sorts of different fields, right? And chemistry. So like, why physics? It really is because there hasn't yet been a designation for computer science or artificial intelligence, which maybe it's time that this might need to change. Of course, they have a limited Nobel Prize funding, so
The
decided.
physics one was the big one, but there was actually a second one in chemistry that was also awarded to work out of Google DeepMind, which is the AlphaFold model for chemistry, which I understand even less about, but it starts to have a very interesting impact of going, okay, so we are awarding Nobel Prize in fields to underlying technology, but then it feels like maybe that should be math. It's hard for me to quantify. I'm still struggling with the fact that they are in different fields, even though I feel like the work absolutely has the impact on the world that should be rewarded.
Exactly. I think the idea behind the physics one was like this drew on ideas from physics. It seems like specifically for neural networks, it's like this is biology. Then this is this
Yeah,
drawing from
right.
biology.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's an interesting one.
for sure. So we're ending our monthly news roundup on the Nobel Prize. So don't ever say that we didn't give you the hard science stuff on this podcast, even though we're a little goofy at times. So with that, we're finished for the October AI news.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, now it is time to dive into the top questions across the AI world right now. And I've got a doozy that I'd love to dive into. I'm especially excited to dive into this with you, Ying. So, annual goal setting season is upon us. It's the time of year where we look into 2025, and I often get the question, how is setting AI goals different? Like, how do you, when there's so much uncertainty, how do you do it? And I'd love to chat through just how we've both seen it done at some big companies, small companies. I think it's very, very different in terms of how people do it. But I think that could help give people some different approaches to draw from when they're thinking about goals around AI, particularly like AI innovation. If you're a company that hasn't done something before and you're not entirely sure of like what the capabilities are that it takes to get it done, how do you approach that when you're trying to think ahead a year? Um, do you want I can kick off or do you want to kick off? I'd love to hear how you've seen it done at different companies too.
I would say expect it to be completely different. You can follow the same process as long as you start with a sentence that says everything I'm about to show you can be thrown away in 6 weeks.
Exactly. Like getting commitment on these goals is the hard part, right?
Right,
I,
right. And if everybody nods on that first sentence, you proceed with whatever, because there is a certain part of this planning where people want to know that you have thought it through. And it's more that than, we're just going to throw spaghetti against the wall. And having that kind of a more detailed plan presented um, shows that you did some work, but you have to actually have that sentence. If anybody presents to me an AI plan for 12 months and doesn't start with that sentence, I'm like, okay, you don't know what you're doing. When I look
yeah,
at the capability of things 12 months ago, or what I thought was going to be available within this 12 months, out the window. Completely out the window.
yeah, that's true. And I think it's like that ability to stay agile that when you're like, we might pick use case A right now, and then like use a different use case might actually be the better thing to go for with new technology in 2 months from now, right? How, like, are we really going to stick to a less optimal goal because we said in December 2024 is what we're going to do? And what is that threshold at which we would pivot, right? I think that's a great way to think about it. Is like, how do we remain, how do we remain flexible in our goal setting process?
Yeah. What has seemed the one that worked a little bit better is to say, okay, let's pick a priority and a focus. Number one, is AI investment going to be something we do no matter what this year? You can answer that question. That's just a commitment across the board. Is no matter what, we're going to spend a certain amount of money, certain amount of time. We will figure something out. Is that a yes or a no? Right? You can do that. You can commit to that. You can stick to that. And then you go, okay, well then, are we going after a product? Are we just going after internal? Like those things you can definitely commit to and stick to. And then everything else, be like, okay, understand that this is the work we've done based on what we know right now, based on the capabilities right now. It could all change, but we've thought it through as much as we can right now.
Yeah, exactly. The process of saying what information do we have now, and how many of these decisions can we change later versus the ones we need to make now, right? I think it makes a difference too if your company is set up like they have a specific group that is focusing on AI and innovation, right? Like a tiger team or something that's like, we are set up, we're going to go for things, here's the goals we'll take, versus like broader company goals. And I think companies are at different stages of trying this out, right? Some of them are more like, we're going to experiment with one team, other companies are like, we want to be all in and bring everyone along. Those are two different models. And I think it makes a difference in terms of what goals you set. Would you agree?
It yes, because I've had to do both.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are very different. Although I have to say the general enablement, adoption, education awareness one has actually been easier to plan because it's less dependent on the technology. You can be like, okay, I'm going to do this much sessions, I'm going to involve this many people, they're going to spend this much time. You can schedule all of those things, whether today you're talking about 4.0 advanced reasoning, tomorrow a robot is walking through the door, those things can remain the same. Yeah. So the education awareness and enablement piece is easier to plan for, and I think everybody should start there because that piece, without it, your tiger team isn't really going to get very far.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So having some goals around enablement, how are you going to upskill people? And that's the other piece. So I think you can either set goals that are you can definitely set goals that are based on like we're going to build these kind of capabilities. Like what does that look like, right? And then but as far as like output goals, right? Like, so think of like we're going to build this kind of capability is like, we believe if we do that, good things will come out the other end, right? But we have control over the inputs, right? So like, we can build these kind of capabilities, et cetera. We know we can, if that's just a task we got to do, right? Versus an output goal might be like increase revenue by 15% using AI, right? Which it's just scarier to take those output goals. But what's really interesting to me is like it depends on the ethos of the organization. Um, that the like if you do have a like a feature goal, which is the other temptation people have, is like, well, let's make a goal to launch a chatbot by Q2. Like to me, it's like, okay, that's achievable probably, but you could definitely end up being like a who cares kind of goal, right? That we did it. And my director used to refer to these as like watermelon goals, right? Where you're like, sure, it was green, but there's like no real victory in this. We launched a chatbot and then we turned it off 2 months later because nobody used it. So it looks green, but it's really red on the inside. So that was like the watermelon goals to avoid.
What's deceptive about that one is my first reaction when you said this. I'm like, oh, and it's delicious. I'm like, no, that was not the point.
It's not the point. A delicious, refreshing goal.
Yes.
No.
No, no.
Great
Just
with
looks
gin.
green on the outside, but it's red
That's
when
the
you
other good
launch
thing
that
about
bot,
watermelon goals.
and you end up selling your Ford truck for $1 because you forgot to lock it down.
Yeah, exactly. But like, I don't. They were always very keen on setting what they called inside out watermelon goals, like the reverse of a watermelon goal, being that like, let's get agreement that we're going to take on something that's really hard and we're not exactly sure in December how we're going to accomplish it. Like, hey, in 2025, we're going to increase revenue by 15%. We're going to increase costs by 15%. We're going to launch a experience that increases retention by 10%, right? Like some kind of a BHAG, right? A hairy audacious goal, with the thought that number one, at Amazon, those top level goals that went up to Andy Jassy, Jeff Bezos, they expected to only hit 75% of them. They're like, if we hit 100%, we aren't thinking big enough, right? So it takes some buy-in on like, do we want to have a big vision around this and really like reach for the stars? And if that's the case, there's going to be some goals that are not going to make it. But if we do pick a BHAG like that, what are the capabilities we would build along the way to hit this hopefully inspiring goal for our team, right? And we're going to have to learn for a very specific, use case. We're going to have to be great at picking a great use case. We're going to be great at prioritizing, potentially pivoting if we find that there's one with a bigger ROI. We're going to have to build up all the technical capabilities we need to manage data sets and get our data science team iterating so they can test head models at once on different metrics, at evaluating. So at the end of the day, like we only hit 5% instead of the 15% revenue goal. That looks red, but because of all the capabilities we built along the way, it's actually green,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly.
So I really like that ethos, and I think it's a lot more inspiring for, your company too, to actually look at it as like, hey, we're actually trying to do something hard. We don't actually know if it's possible. It's kind
So
of fun to
you're
me.
recommending Inside Out Watermelon, just so.
Inside Out Watermelon Goes. It's not the catchiest name. I feel like maybe I need another metaphor.
Is there a fruit that's red on the outside and green on the dragon fruit?
Dragon fruit.
That's
Are
red
they
and
green on the inside?
I'm gonna make dragon fruit goals. Okay,
Love it. It also sounds more badass. So
right?
it
Yeah,
needs to
but
be equally as delicious, is the point, and good in cocktails. So
yeah, exactly.
we've got a research project ahead of us.
Yeah, excellent.
Fantastic.
Find the fruit.
No,
All
that's
right.
great. Well, thanks for digging into me with that Yuying. I think it's great to just talk about goal setting for AI projects this time of year. So it's one of the top questions I'm getting. That's that for the question section.
Okay, all right. And with that, we're into my favorite segment of all podcasts of all time, and not just ours, and not just because I'm biased. You know. Uh, of course, I am referring to the BS in AI segment that we go through every time in terms of cutting through the bullshit, saying, "Excuse me, WTF? Hello, what's going on in this world?" Now, there's a lot, I grant you, in AI, but we still have to pick just one for me, one for you.
We limited ourselves.
But I have a good one for you this time. We've talked a little bit about the OpenAI raise. Now, let me tell you about this other raise. Number one, it's an AI startup called Poolside, which you cannot tell what it does at all based on the name. But that's not my BS.
Yeah, so it's not related to swimming pools.
Yeah,
It's a
and my
mini
BS is not
BS.
about name of AI companies that have that's a single word that you have no idea what the company actually does. I'll leave that for that number. So they've raised, and this is closed, a closed round. And we're talking pre-seed. That means no product. I don't actually know what their product is. I've never seen it. People kind of know what area they're in. With that, they raised $500 million in a pre-seed round. Pre-seed a valuation of 3 billion, and this is not their first raise. Their total raise to date is 626 million dollars. I haven't seen the product. I don't actually know what it does. It's supposed to make a lot of money. What
So there's some folks involved that are making this happen, right? You
the
said
hell, people?
it's just based on who's involved, right? Like at that point.
It's based on who the founder is, X blank blank X blank. And that, usually when we do any investment due diligence, the first thing that our business I ask, do you have revenue? Do you have customer? Like that's assuming you already had the product, you have market fit, you have customer feedback, and somebody was willing to pay you for it. We're talking about, I don't even know what the product is. I haven't seen it.
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
$626 million.
So it is founded by Jason Warner, who's the former CTO at GitHub. And then there was also the other co-founder, Eliza Kant, was former of an analytics firm. I think it's the GitHub. Um,
That's all I ever heard about this company. I'm like, so what's the product? And the guy's like, I don't know, but it's the XCTO of GitHub. I'm like, okay.
exactly. Yeah. So it just indicates like all this idea of like, oh, it's cooling off the frenzy around AI. It's like not even close, right?
Yeah,
When
the
it's
valuation.
I mean, we've always been this way around valuations where I remember even learning in my MBA when it came to like startup valuations, they're like, it's so pull a number out of your butt that like at a certain point they're like, you're a Stanford grad and you have a CS degree. That's two founders, $2 million. That's the value of your company. Like there's some quick
I'm
proxies that
pretty
people
sure they
do.
don't have 626 people.
Exactly.
They
Like,
wouldn't have been able to hire that many that fast. I was
yeah,
like, this
they
is
do have a
a
career site. I bet it's hopping. So,
oh my God,
but
all
yes,
you
it's
need
in,
is
it's in the
one
coding space too, which is
X
so
code.
so hot right
Yes,
now
we
too.
are in the code space. It is hot. But yeah, it's just one founder with one ex CTO of GitHub, and there you go, $500 million. You
Bullshit.
cannot
When
find them.
when so many founders are like scrabbling with really good, solid ideas and product, and are like, "Can I raise $1 million?" No, like, come
Yeah,
on.
and if you're not Andreessen Horowitz, you can't even get a hello. I'm just like, really? I don't. Anyways, I don't like classism. I'm just saying.
Exactly.
Big.
Yeah, but they really are at that stage betting on people. Super interesting.
Yeah, very.
Okay, here's my bullshit this week. It's driving me crazy. Is the chasm between the buzz online about what people are doing with AI and then like on the ground what's really happening, especially like at the majority of enterprises. Um, I've noticed now if you're on LinkedIn and you're following the influencers in these different spaces, especially in the tech sphere, it's like it's no longer about just retrieval augmented generation. That's old hat. It's like now it's about knowledge base augmented, ontology augmented, retrieval generation, agentic, RAG, multi-agent workflows with like swarms using OpenAI's swarm framework to deploy a swarm of AI agents. It's so overwhelming. And I was already dealing with so many folks coming from organizations that like maybe have tech or IT teams, but don't necessarily have data science teams going like, oh, we don't have data scientists. We can't do anything with this at all. And it's like, no, no. Look what you can do with the prompt, right? We have folks in my programs who in 8 weeks are like ramping up simple chatbots to help individual owners or small companies like build a chatbot that is taking a load off their shoulders to answering questions about their company. And you're like, it's very, very useful simply at the prompting level, at the process automation, at the chatbot level, like don't think because these folks are all running ahead with these advanced techniques that you're left in the dust or it's too late to start. It's crazy how I think OpenAI in particular is doing like its latest release of its model, which is all about logic, chain of thought, or tree of thought reasoning. Like they're doing this for the front runners and the people who are like, hey, how can we get to or replicate AGI most quickly, right? So they're working right on the very cusp of what's innovative and like running there. And you're like, they're doing that, and then they're supporting these end users who are like, oh, what can I do with ChatGPT? But in the middle, there's all these folks who are just trying to get their hands around like, what's a good use case to save some money using this, and overwhelmed by that. We need to do such a better job of supporting people who aren't necessarily like either FANG, one of the big tech companies with hordes of data scientists, or like those very, very early first adopters rushing at this. It's like, man, the middle's coming and it's messy, and they're the more this tech talk is the thing that's everyone sees, the more they think it's not for them. Right?
Yeah,
Like I just think we need to
that's the
keep
kind of
reminding.
the sad part. I was excited about this technology because number one, it's natural language based. Number two, it is a major step in democratization of something really cool and fancy and technical, but actually make it usable, practical for everybody, right? So now that we've gone past all like 100 prompts that'll simplify your life, um, everyone's like agent and AI workers, and everyone start to back off. Like even, of course, I'm mired in this news every day, and I forget. Like even in my own company, when I last did a training, I had set up all these advanced techniques to teach them, and then they're like, "Nick, can you just break down a good prompt?" So I spent the whole time like, okay, so give it context, tell it what you want to do, maybe some steps, maybe an example. Like I spent the whole time, and they were like, "That was the best training ever." I'm like, right,
Yeah.
right. Let's
Exactly.
off
And
the
for ages, I was like reticent to talk about prompting because I'm like, guys, it's just communication. Like, it's just English. Like, just be good at communicating. Right?
I will find out how many people don't know how to communicate.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's like, and then because we don't talk enough about how much is achievable with simple prompting, so many of the students who come into my programs are like, okay, here's what I want to do. And the first step is to train a model. And I'm like, I don't think you need to go there, man. Like, really, like, let's see how good it is. Let's write out a plan to evaluate it. Let's see what you get out of the box before you go down this, like, if you want to go from 95 to 98%, yeah, we need a plan for that. But that people are still not getting how accessible it is because they think of it as a technology.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I still tell them to think of it as a new PhD intern, really smart at whatever it is they know, but they have no idea how to do your thing.
Right. Yeah. So how much context can you give it? Yep. Completely. Well, that's my bullshit. I think we're wrapping up on the bullshit for this week.
Excellent. Excellent round of bullshitting. No, 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 sorry, not bullshit excellent round.
Awesome. Well, we only have time for one last segment, and that is plugs. So, Yuying, do you have any plugs for this month?
Absolutely, as always, my newsletter, so substack.yuying.com, or you can follow me on LinkedIn and get access to a similar newsletter where I break down more AI trends and analysis and risks and hopefully demystify it.
Amazing. So, Yuying's Substack is one of my must reads every month. They're very few and far between. I subscribe to a lot of newsletters and read very few, unfortunately. But from my side, I also want to plug my newsletter at AI Career Boost. We'll share the link in the comments on how you can stay up to date on the information product leaders need to know, any new training opportunities coming up. That's where they will be announced. And as always, we always like to shamelessly plug the show. So don't forget to like and subscribe, give us a little thumbs up or a 5-star, whatever is appropriate for your podcast pipe. And if you want to reach out with any questions, that email again, support@aicareerboost.com. We'd love to hear what you'd love to hear us talk about, discuss, etc.
Your BS if you want us to take apart.
Chilled bevy. Awesome. Well, that's another episode of AI After Hours, and we'll see you all next time.